So in this video, I'm going to show you how to draw a realistic turkey since it's almost Thanksgiving. And this is recommended for ages 11 and up or more advanced drawing. So this is the drawing I did, and it's based off of a photo that I found on the internet, and I will show you that photo so you can, if you want to try this, you can use that to sort of look off of. And this took me probably 5 or 6 hours, so it does take quite a while. I'm not going to do the whole 5 hours in this, but I just want to show you mainly the steps of how to do it so that you can get a result like this or better. Alright, so our first steps, so I'll put up the photo that I'm looking off of so you guys can look off of it as well. So the first step is to get your basic outline of the turkey. Okay, so what I'm going to start with is sort of the chest part. So we're going to put sort of angles down this way, and then angles down a little bit that way. And you want to draw lightly at first because you're just doing sort of a basic outline. You're probably going to have to adjust it quite a bit before you actually start doing all the detail and stuff. So, and then one of the legs sort of curves down this way and has like the little claws. I'm just going to lightly draw like a little claw there so I know what that is. And then the other one. And sort of another claw right here, roughly. And that claw curves up, and I'm just lightly doing this because I'm going to go back through and do more detail on those. But I just want to get a general sort of scale and position, because I'm not going to go real into detail until I have everything positioned right, because then I'd just be having to redo it. So that goes up roughly about here and sort of curves. And then we got sort of like little feathers or something down here. And then the other leg, and it curves about here. Sort of little claws here. Another one there. And then this claw goes back there. And goes up. Little claw goes up. Okay, so I can already tell I'm probably going to have to adjust this a little bit, but that's why I drew it real light. Okay, so we have this, and it's actually sort of more of an angle that way. And then it curves up. And then right up here is going to be the neck and head area. So we're going to curve here. Curves sort of up, sort of almost like an S. Curves there. Sort of something like that. And a little bit wider here for the head. And it sort of goes down a little bit. And then that's the beak. And the bottom part of the beak. And that sort of curves up there. And we got these two, well, actually I'm not going to do those yet. We have two little things coming up here, but I'm going to wait on that. And then we're going to draw here, sort of the body goes up like this. Sort of curves, goes up. Actually it goes up a little bit further here. Something like that. And goes down slightly. Okay, we're going to leave that there because we're going to come back and do the wing that goes down here. So it curves like about here, goes up, and curves down. And then sort of goes wide and then sort of curves in towards the end of the feather there. So, and the end of the wing sort of ends about right here. So I'm going to put like just a tiny little mark so I know sort of where I'm aiming towards. So, and we need to adjust that a little bit. So it curves out and goes down, curves up, and then down a little bit. Okay, so we hit the mark down here. Now we want to try and get this one to go there. So it needs to actually curve up a little bit more. And then down, and then it sort of goes down a little bit and then goes up for the other set of feathers. So we'll go up there and sort of curving it down. And we sort of went past the mark there, but we'll adjust it like that. There we go. All right, so now we've got this sort of in position. Yeah, it's a little too far out. So I'm going to sort of adjust that. There we go. That's a little better. Okay. That's about right. Sort of connect under here a little. All right, so we'll go back up here. And from the picture, it looks like the end of these feathers of the body sort of end like right about here, like almost towards the end of the wing here. So we'll sort of curve it out like this. It sort of flares and it curves back in, something like that. Okay, and then we have the feathers that are going to go out here. So we'll put a little bit of guidelines here. So we'll just lightly sketch a line here, and then about here, goes back that way. So we know that we need to put our feathers within this area here. And they have like the smaller little feathers back here. So I want to draw those first. So it sort of starts like up here and curves like that. And this is where it starts to get confusing because you have so many of these back here. So I'll count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9-ish, and one's sort of split in half. So there's 2. And I'm just lightly doing these because I'm probably have to adjust them. But we just want to have a general idea of where they're supposed to be. It's back in behind this one. Sort of like that a little bit. So that one looks sort of weird. I don't know why. This one's sticking out too far, I think. I'm not sure. Something like that. Okay. And then we'll do these feathers out here. So some of these are sort of overlapping each other, but we can sort of get a general sort of idea of where they're supposed to be. So we'll go ahead and count through the feathers. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11 full feathers and about 3 sort of smaller short feathers. So I'm going to do sort of the small short ones first because they're on the ends. So we'll do sort of curves in a little bit like that. And then this one's sort of like a medium feather, goes up here and curves a little bit. And it's sort of overlapped by another feather. So we're going to draw that feather up there. Okay. And then we have a small little feather down here. It sort of goes and it curves. And once we start adding the detail and stuff, one of the things you can do on the edges of the feathers to sort of make it look more realistic is instead of having like a nice smooth curved line like this, you can sort of go through and sort of go like that a little bit. Makes it have sort of that feathery, rigid edge. Okay, so we did this little leaf down, or I don't know why I keep calling it a leaf, little feather down here. So now what we're going to do is between this line and this line, we're going to sort of divide it up. So I forgot how many. I think I said 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 11. So what we can do is sort of see where they're lined up and just lightly sketch out where they need to be. Because usually if you start drawing one and then the other, you sort of get it either really, really small, where it's like you have a bunch of extra room down here, or you make them too big where you don't have as many, or you have too big of feathers. So you want to sort of sketch that out a little bit. You don't have to be exact, but so it looks like this one goes about here, and the next one sort of goes here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it sort of fans out. So you'll have it wider at the top and sort of narrower at the bottom. That's another good reason to sketch them out, is so you get the angles right, because it goes like that. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we can sort of adjust this line a little bit, just slightly down, and maybe adjust the lines just slightly. We just have to make room for one more. So one, sort of like that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so that's our general guidelines for the feathers there. And before I start drawing all the feathers, I want to make sure all this stuff is correct, because if I have to end up moving some of this, I might have to readjust those. So we'll look back at it. Yeah, I think for the most part it's pretty good. And I might have to adjust the angle of the neck and the head a little bit, but that's not going to really cause anything over here to be adjusted. All right. So we're good on our proportions. So now we'll go and we're going to sort of sketch through all these feathers right here, which is probably the, well, I was going to say the most tedious part, but there's other parts. Like once we start drawing all the feathers down here, that takes quite a while. All right, so with the ends of the feathers here, they're sort of curved, like curved rectangles. So you have the rectangle, and then at the end, instead of having points on the edges, it's going to be more curved. So you're sort of curve those like this. And you don't want them all to be the exact same curve and the exact same length, because if you're wanting it to look more realistic, they're all sort of slightly different. So you sort of have it curved. Now it is easier just to do like that on every single one. But if you look closely, you have some that are sort of like this one. It sort of curves up a little bit, and then it goes sharper down. Sort of like that, where it's not perfectly curved like this. And this one actually isn't curved like that. It's more curved to a point a little bit more. Sort of like that a little bit. And even the sides aren't going to necessarily be exactly straight lines like that, because there's parts where you go through and it goes like that. But these are just your guidelines so that you sort of keep it organized. But you can go through the side, sort of go like this. Or if you want to do it like that, where you just sort of go like this and you're making the little lines, like wavy lines like that, makes it look a little bit more detailed. But you can go through and even do more detail where you're doing exactly where it cuts. Sort of like that. And I'm not doing this super detailed because, like I said, it takes like 5 or 6 hours to do this whole thing like I did with this one. But I just mainly want to go through all the steps with this so that you can, when you are spending time with it and doing it really detailed, you can know what you're doing. So I'm just going to quickly go through all these feathers here. And if you look closely at a lot of them, they're all sort of slightly different, but you can sort of curve them a little bit up at the top, and they sort of go a little bit to a point, but not a sharp point, more of like a curved point, if that makes sense. So you can do sort of something like that, and if you don't want to do it super detailed, you can just curve it at the top a little, like that. And then with the sides of the feather, you can sort of just do something like this. Something like that. But the main key with the feathers is you have to have them similar but just slightly different. And you have some that are overlapping each other. So like go back through and add this one back in here. So between this one, there's sort of like a little feather back in here that you can see. You can just barely see the end of it there. But I'm going to go through some of these like that. This one is a little more curved, more symmetric curve like this. And most of these down here are more almost like this. You don't want it perfectly curved like that though, because then it looks sort of weird. It doesn't look natural. So even on the ones that look almost perfectly curved, you sort of want to just wobble the line a little bit. So like this, sort of curved like that. And this needs to curve down a little bit. And with these, they're not quite as wide down here because they're overlapped more so down here, but I do need to curve that a little bit differently. Something like that. And the reason you want those jagged edges on the side to be at that same angle is because those are the ends of the little feathers that are going up like this. So, but you want to do it light and space out the lines a little bit. Then you can go back through and add more lines like this in certain areas to make it look more realistic, because you have on the feathers you have different areas where they're a little bit darker, a little bit lighter. If it's all one shade, it doesn't really look that realistic, because on a real turkey you have different shades on there. So sort of something like that. You can see it a little bit more on this one here, how you have the different shades throughout the different feathers. And it has sort of this little dark line right here, which is just a dark stripe on each of the feathers that's almost lined up like that. So you'll do that on all the feathers there, but it's darker for the most part towards the end of the turkey, and it gets lighter as it goes out, and then it's darker down here because that wing's sort of covering it up a little bit. So these feathers down here will be pretty dark, like you can see in the photo. And then on these feathers here, it's going to be dark to light as it goes out. It's just going to have a little bit of a shadow there. And then you want to sort of put a few little lines like this on some of these feathers, because it's sort of like those lines there. So it's just giving it a little bit of texture there. It's not, that way it doesn't look super smooth like there's rocks or something back there. And then, so down here for the claws, you can sort of adjust these. This one, it's where the foot's sort of up off the ground. So it's a little bit more bent right here. And then we're going to put a little curved feather here, so we know that separates it. And then down here, sort of curve it here, so we know it's separate from the body. Well, it's on the body, but you know. Okay, so now we'll go to the head. So this is probably one of the most important parts, because that's what really stands out a lot, is the face, the eyeball, and all that. So we have the beak here, and here, let's zoom in a little bit here. So here on the beak, it sort of goes here, curves up slightly, right there, like that, and then it curves down. So this is sort of the outside of the beak. And then this bottom part curves up, and then these lines sort of meet right there. That's going to be the beak there. And on the beak, it has sort of right here, you draw like a little line or a little oval for the nostril there. And then we're going to draw the two little things. I'm not sure what those are. They look like just little lines, or like big hairs, something like that. And then, so with this, I need to sort of adjust this bottom line, because it needs to sort of be like this. There we go. And then, so for the eyeball, what we're going to do is actually we're going to draw sort of this little bone type deal that's back here. So it goes and curves sort of right in here, and then goes down, and then it sort of goes something like that. And the reason I did that first is so if I have the position of this right, it helps me get the position of the eyeball right, because I know that the eyeball is between this little bone and the beak. So if that's in the right area, I can sort of more so see where that needs to go. So the eyeball is pretty close to this bone, and so it looks like it's maybe somewhere around there, I think. And we'll sort of fix that, make it look a little better. It's a little bit something like that. And the eyeball is pretty much all black except for it has a highlight sort of towards the top. So with that, we're going to do sort of a line like this. And we're going to shade in this bottom part of the eye, make it real dark. And that top part is the highlight right there, so we don't want to touch that. And then there's sort of the eyebrow part that scrunches here, so we'll curve it in, sort of lightly shade like this, and then sort of lightly shade under here for like the bottom eyelid part. Just lightly there. And then this curves sort of up like that for the eyebrow. Then it goes down. Okay, so now we're going to move on to sort of drawing the rest of the feathers throughout the turkey. And this is the most tedious part and what takes the longest. Because if you look on the picture, there's basically feathers throughout the whole body of the turkey and longer feathers on here, on the wing. But up here by the face, the little bone and the little line there, from there down to where like the neck stops, it basically looks like a bunch of circles or ovals. So I'm just going to quickly sort of go through and draw like little circles. Now you don't want them all to be like the exact same. You want them to be a little bit different. And you can make them not perfect circles, sort of jagged, but I'm just doing this quickly so you can sort of see what to do. And they sort of overlap and stuff until they get down, or almost look like scales. All the feathers look like scales on a fish, sort of. But you sort of more circular up here on the neck, and then when you get down towards the body, they're a little more oval. So, and there's like a little thing here that curves like this, sort of like that chest plate or something. I'm not sure what that is. But and then you go, they sort of curve out like this, and you can sort of curve them down like this. They're sort of ovals going like this, and then they sort of curve along the side at an angle like this. So you'll draw them like this, and then it sort of angles like this until they're straight, and they basically go straight this way. So you're drawing these curved here, like this, and the ones up here towards this back side of the neck, they're already basically vertical. So you want to sort of draw those vertical like this, and then you're wanting to adjust this down here so it's like this until all in here gets to where it's vertical, matching up with this, and then they're basically just vertical all the way back. So it's a little challenging here trying to get the angle right of them until you move them back, and there'll be different angles on this wing here, and then we'll shade. Okay, so I'll finish up these feathers here on this wing. You want to make sure you sort of stagger them and make some a little bit longer than others so it looks a little more natural. Something like that, and then we're down to the bottom of this curve here, which is where it sort of transitions to the bigger feathers. So here we sort of have the feathers that go a little bit wider and longer there, something like this. Bigger feathers. And those ones go across here, something like this. They're a little bit curved. These might be a little bit too big. Yeah, maybe a little bit. And then they just sort of gradually get bigger and bigger. So we have another row here of these ones that are sort of hidden behind those. Sort of like that. Something like that. And then the ones after that are even longer. And they're sort of all overlapped. So we sort of have them curved, and they only go about halfway up, so, or a little over halfway, so about right there. So it goes here, and it curves in like this, and they all sort of curve in like that behind each other, all the way down to the end here. Sort of like that. And the rest of them are longer feathers, so they sort of go like this and then curve a little bit and then curve off the wing here. And on this, so this, what we did was just the general outline for the wing. So with these, you can have them go a little bit past this line and sort of curve them up a little bit. That way they're a little bit more separated. They're not all one feather together. And this one sort of curves down like that, and then I'm going to draw a little bit past it, something like that. But these are all overlapped just like these were. So this is the top one, and then this will be the bottom one. So they all sort of curve like, oh, that curves up a little more. Then it's sort of pointed on the end on some, and this one here is a little more curved. So we'll draw this one, and it sort of has a curved end there. And then especially the ones further down, you want them more separated because they're sort of fanned out. So we'll go to this next one, and it's a little closer together, and it's curved down a little bit, and it's not quite connected to that one. So we have a little bit of a gap there, right in here, that little gap. And so we'll do, these ones are closer, just slightly. And that one will curve down from that one as well. So we'll have a little bit of a gap there. Something like that. And this one here. It's curved down. Oh. Something like that. And then these ones down here are all pretty close together. So we'll sort of draw a line there. Something like that. And another line. sort of layered down and through there. And then you'll see a lot of the feathers on these have sort of like little areas cut out like that, where the feathers sort of go through and do that. Sort of add a few of those little details in throughout so that they just look a little bit more natural and realistic there. Something like that. There you go. Something similar to that. You can add a few more in there. But that's mainly what it looks like there. You sort of put some of the lines, sort of like we did on these feathers here, angled up, but this one, the end of them's over here, so we're angling them towards the end of the feather a little bit. But a lot of these, we're only seeing one side because they're stacked on top of each other. So we're just doing sort of down like this. And you want to make sure that each one has a little bit different shade and stuff to them, because if they all become one shade, they'll all sort of blend together. So you want to make sure that they're all a little bit different so that they stand apart from each other. So we have that, and make this one a little bit lighter so it stands out. There we go. And then these lines down here for the feathers are going to be pretty dark because they're sort of hidden underneath the rest of the feathers down here, especially right here where they're divided, because you're going to have shadows right on the edge of those feathers. So sort of make those lines pretty dark. Something like that. Oh yeah. Okay. And then I'm going to sort of just lightly shade, darkly shade these, because they're going to be pretty dark. And then I'm going to make this line darker because that's where it separates from the lower portion of the feathers. So that's like they're going to be like a little shadow there. And then sort of darken this part a little bit. Because that's like the underneath part of the feathers. So it's going to be pretty dark there. Alright, so we got that there. And so what we do with all these feathers on here is we'll go through and we see sort of where it's dark and where it's light, where it needs to be shaded. So it looks like it's pretty dark right on here, like the chest area. So we'll sort of shade it pretty dark here and pretty dark down here and under the feather area. A little bit dark here because of the shadow of the wing. So we'll do that. And then once we do that, we'll come back through and we'll actually do the shading on each individual feather, except for the ones that are real dark and stuff you don't necessarily need to because they're covered up. So we'll do that. I'm not going to go through all of it necessarily, but we'll make it pretty dark right here. And the feathers back here, like I said, they have sort of like a line. So there's a little bit of an area like this where you can see a little section is darker and it goes sort of all the way down. So like this one on here, I don't know if you can see it very well, but here on the feathers on the back, there's sort of this little line. It's a dark line that goes through all of them. and then just do lines like this, and sort of like we did on these feathers. You want certain areas to be darker and certain areas lighter so that they look more natural. Something like that. And then let's see, so with the legs down here, they sort of have little curved lines like this on the front side, and they sort of curve around the leg a little bit. And then you can sort of go just real lightly draw like little sketched lines like that back and forth. It sort of gives it a little bit of texture. Something like that. And then the claws, so the little talons, they curve and go out like this. And so they have one little spot, like a little highlight. So you color it in or shade it in black, but you just have a little bit of an area like that that's light for the highlight there. Something like that. And let's see here. Their leg gets a little bit darker on this side. We'll shade just a little bit here on the back side of the leg. Sort of gets a little bit lighter as it goes over, and it's a little darker towards the top. And these are still pretty light, so you just lightly, but they're not completely white, so you want it to at least have a little bit of shading on there. And then we'll fix these claws here. And they have the little highlights there. And then on the inside of this one, there's a little bit. And there's a little bit of shadows towards the bottom of each of the little talons. Like that. So a little bit there, a little bit there. Sort of in the inside areas. This one's a little bit darker on both sides. Sort of has shadows on both sides of the foot or leg here. So we sort of just lightly shade. Something like that. And it's just a little bit darker down here at the bottom. Something like that. And it does have a little bit of a dark spot up here. And then I'm going to touch up this area here. Just sort of. Okay. And then, let's see here. So on this eye up here, there's a little bit, it's a little bit darker here. And then it gets lighter as it curves around the eyebrow. Then on the beak, it's just slightly darker on the end of the beak and then pretty light the rest of it. And it's dark, pretty dark down here on the bottom of the beak and the bottom of the head there. And sort of it gets a little bit lighter. And then we're right here in the cheek area where it curves, sort of dark inside the curves. And then It's lighter inside here. Something sort of like this. And we'll just fill in this area with a really, really light shade. Something sort of like that. And then with this little bone here, so it's going to mainly be white except for right here where it curves, this bottom part where it goes down. So it's going to be a little bit darker down there. And darker here so that we can sort of tell it's separated or it has depth to it, and we're just lightly shade that part. Sort of like that. And I'm going to add a little more hair on the ends because it sort of gives it more detail. Something like that. Okay. And then, so I'm not going to necessarily shade this whole thing, but like with these ones back here, I'm going to show you it's a little bit darker when it's close to the turkey. And we sort of lighten it up as it goes back. Sort of something like that. Sort of something like that. Okay. And then so this little chest plate thing will be a little bit not quite as dark as this, but almost. So something like that. And what we're going to do is I made these areas dark just to show you, but and then you take it and you shade it out and make it lighter. Okay, so I got it shaded a little bit. It needs a lot more touching up, but that's a general idea there. And then for these little wings in here, it's sort of dark on the edges or underneath because that's where the shadow is, like that. Underneath here, the underneath parts, and then they sort of get lighter as it goes back. And dark here because it's the bottom, because that's sort of like a little shadow there. And then it gets light. Something along those lines there. And then it's also going to be sort of dark on this side because they're overlapping each other. So this one's on top and then sort of this one's the bottom. So you want to sort of darken all the lines for the most part there. Something like that. And then you sort of want to blend it out. So blend it out from this way, going down, because the shadow the light's coming in from this way, so it's going to be dark, light, and sort of this angle a little bit. So we'll try and darken it a little bit there, sort of like that. Something sort of like that. And it will be the same with this, because this is the top, this is the bottom, so it's stacked on top of each other. So you'll have the shadows for each one. Something sort of like that, a little bit. And so with the rest of these feathers, what you're going to do is, since it's sort of light, I guess the light's sort of coming from this way-ish, because that's why the shadow of the wing's this way. So it's sort of coming from up here, coming down this way. So what you're going to do on each feather is you're going to darken the outline where it's the furthest from the light. Now I made that a little too dark, but because down here, like, they're basically disappeared down here because I shaded over them. So you'll have to just sort of lightly draw them back in. Or if you don't want to do that, just start drawing them where it's getting lighter. Sort of something like this. And then the ones you can see, you can sort of lightly draw back in. Something like that. But the main key is you want it dark in the corner away from the light and lighter as it's going towards the light in each feather. So you got to think about, okay, so light's coming from this way. So I'm going to darken this part because it's the furthest away just a little bit. I made that line too dark though, and then you sort of just darken a little bit around the edge and just sort of try and blend it a little bit if you can. It's hard to blend in such small feathers, but I'm going to lighten that line up a little bit. And then up here, since it's a lot lighter, you'll just lightly shade around the areas. So I'll show you with this one. I'll zoom in so you can see a little bit better. But you can see how each one is shaded. You can see a little bit of the highlight to where the light is, a little bit of the darker areas, and it still gets darker down here. And then for the feathers, like I was showing you, you do lines, and you can make them different texture, or different textures, I guess. Well, different patterns, I should say, because some are a little lighter, some are a little darker, but they do blend together a little bit because they're all sort of feathered or fanned out there. But that, and then what I did is I drew that little leaf down there for extra little something, and then you can add the shadows underneath the feet if you want to do that. Gives it a little more realistic look to it. So I'll show you that a little bit on this one. So right about here, underneath the foot, you make it pretty dark and just sort of something like that, because it's going to be really dark underneath the foot because the foot's really close to the ground. And this one's a little bit raised up, so it won't be right underneath the foot where it is. It'll be down here, sort of lined up with this one where the ground is. So you'll do a little something like this. And then spread it out a little bit. Something sort of like that for the darker areas. And then you can sort of lighten it up because there's still a shadow from the overall turkey, but it's just lighter because it's further away from the ground. So you have the darker spots like that for the feet, and then you just sort of make sure it's still aligned with this, but sort of go out to where the turkey stops, so here and here, but it goes from darker sort of to lighter as it gets to the outside. And it'll also get from darker to lighter this way because it's going towards the end of the turkey this way too. Something sort of like that, and then I'm going to sort of blend these shadows a little bit. Something sort of like that. Maybe make this shadow a little bit darker on the outside here. There we go. Something sort of like that. And as you can see, the shading is a lot different on this one because I went through and shaded each little feather, and I went through and touched up some of this on here too, and filled out all the little lines and stuff for the feather. Compared to this one here, I haven't quite done all that with the feathers there and all the darkness. Let's see here. And you can see how this is a little more blended on this one. Compared to here, I'm just starting with the dark part and I haven't really blended it all the way out yet. But that's how it's supposed to look eventually. But it takes quite a while to sort of mess with this and blend it and go through each little feather. But that is the basic steps there for how to get a realistic looking turkey like this one. You'll just have to sort of go through like this and go through each little feather and sort of darken it up on the edge that's away from the light and fill in the feathers back there and do the same here with all the feathers on here. So you can sort of see on this one. So it's darker here and sort of gets a little bit lighter as it goes down. And then here, it's darker here and really dark down here, a little bit darker here, and light sort of coming down this way a little bit. And there's not really a whole lot of shading back here, except for it does get darker down here on these feathers and a little bit darker towards the end here and a little lighter out here. But that is pretty much it. And I didn't go through how to draw the leaf, but that's just something you can add if you want to, just to sort of give it a little more fall feeling. But that is pretty much how you draw a realistic turkey. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comment section and I'll try and get to them. Thank you for watching and have a happy Thanksgiving.